poor girl handed a box to Santa Claus on the street, and when he opened it and saw photos of triplets, he could not hold back his tears. Snow fell softly over Candlelight Lane, turning London into a fairy tale scene. Twinkling lights decorated trees and shop windows, while the aroma of roasted chestnuts filled the air. In the midst of this Christmas spectacle, Pierre adjusted his fake beard and the belt that barely held in his padded Santa Claus belly. At 58 years old, Pierre had been personifying the jolly old man for 2 decades, but something about that cold December night made him feel it would be different. Perhaps it was the peculiar sparkle of the stars, or the almost reverent silence hanging over the festive crowd. "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas," his voice rang out, drawing curious glances and smiles from passing children. Pierre handed out sweets and waved, his heart warmed by the Christmas magic that never failed to touch him. That was when he saw her. At the edge of the light cast by the lamppost stood a small figure. A girl no older than 10 remained still, her eyes fixed on Pierre. Her thin, faded coat barely protected her from the cold, and her gloves, full of holes, revealed red, trembling fingers. But it wasn't the child's obvious poverty that caught Pierre's attention. It was her gaze, a look that carried a weight far beyond her age, a mixture of desperate hope and contained fear. In her small, frozen hands, the girl held a battered shoebox, hugging it as if it were her most precious treasure. Pierre felt a lump in his throat. In all his years as Santa Claus, he had never seen such a stark contrast between the joy around him and the sadness emanating from that lonely child. "Come here, little one," he called softly, extending his hand. "It's too cold to stand still. Would you like to tell Santa your Christmas wish?" The girl hesitated, her eyes searching Pierre's face as if looking for something beyond the costume. Slowly, almost in slow motion, she approached. My name is Manon." Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling like a leaf in the wind. And I need your help, Santa." Pierre knelt down, ignoring the chill penetrating his costume, to be at the girl's eye level. Up close, he could see the freckles dotting her nose, red from the cold, and the quiver of her lower lip. "What is your wish, Manon?" he asked gently. Without a word, Manon held out the box. Pierre took it, surprised by its weight. His heart raced, feeling he was about to unravel a mystery. With trembling fingers, he lifted the lid. The world around him seemed to disappear the instant his eyes fell upon the box's contents. 3 identical faces smiled at him from an old, faded photograph. 3 children, no more than babies, with the same brown eyes as Manon. "Oh my God," Pierre murmured, his mind spinning. "They're triplets." Manon nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "That's us. Me and my brothers. We were separated 2 years ago. Please, Santa, help me find them." Pierre felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. In his years as Santa Claus, he had received countless requests, toys, video games, even a pony once. But this was something completely different. His hands shook as he rummaged further in the box, finding a folded note. The childish handwriting was clear, despite tear stains. "Dear Santa, I know you do miracles. Please bring my brothers back. I promise to be good forever if you reunite us. With love, Manon." Pierre looked at Manon, seeing not just a child, but the weight of a separation no young soul should bear. Without realizing it, tears began to roll down his cheeks, blending with the fake beard. "Yes, Manon," he said, his voice choked. "Can you tell me more about your brothers?" The girl sniffled, wiping her own tears with the threadbare sleeve of her coat. "François and Henri. We were inseparable at St. Clair's orphanage. But then, one day, they were taken away. Different families. They said it was for the best, but it's not. I miss them so much." Manon's words were like daggers in Pierre's heart. The square around them remained festive, but there, in that emotional bubble, a silent drama unfolded, invisible to the cheerful passers-by. "Why do you believe I can help, Manon?" Pierre asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and emotion. Manon looked at him with a mixture of hope and despair that made Pierre's heart clench even tighter. Because you're magical, aren't you? You can do anything. And I have no one else to ask. The weight of that responsibility fell on Pierre like an avalanche. He wasn't magical. He was just an ordinary man in a costume. But Manon's gaze married that pure, unwavering hope. In that moment, Pierre made a decision that would change his life forever. He didn't know how, but he would find Francois and Henri. He would reunite these triplets, and perhaps, in the process, rediscover the Christmas magic he had long ceased to believe in. "Manon," he said, his voice firm despite the tears, "I cannot promise magic, but I promise I will do everything in my power to help you and your brothers. We will find them, together." The smile that lit Manon's face was like sunrise after a long winter's night. She threw her arms around Pierre, hugging him with all the strength her small body could muster. As he hugged her back, Pierre looked up at the starry sky, a silent plea in his heart. Snow continued to fall, covering London with a white mantle of possibilities. And amid it all, an old Santa and a little girl sealed a pact that promised not only to reunite a family, but also to rekindle the flame of hope in a world that often seemed to have forgotten the true meaning of Christmas. Pierre's study, normally a haven of tranquility, now felt too small to contain the magnitude of the story Manon was unfolding. The walls, lined with books and mementos of a life dedicated to teaching, bore silent witness as the girl, seated in an armchair too large for her frail body, narrated her journey. "It all started at St. Clair's orphanage," Manon began, her voice trembling slightly. "Francois, Henri, and I were inseparable. We slept in bed side by side, shared every meal, every laugh." Pierre listened intently, his heart tightening with each word. He had exchanged his Santa costume for regular clothes, but felt that the responsibility he had taken on was greater than any outfit he had ever worn. "Then one day," Manon continued, tears shining in her eyes, "a family came. They wanted to adopt just one of us. They said they couldn't care for 3 children. Pierre felt a lump in his throat. "And they chose you?" he asked softly. Manon shook her head. "No, they chose Francois. He was the strongest, the healthiest. I remember him shouting, begging not to go without us. But they took him anyway." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with emotion. Pierre struggled to maintain his composure, aware he needed to be strong for Manon. "And Henri?" he asked gently. 2 weeks later, Manon replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Another family came. They took Henri. He tried to hide Sao, but..." She couldn't finish her sentence, sobs shaking her small body. Pierre rose from his chair, kneeling beside Manon. Hesitantly, he placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. "And you, Manon? How did you end up..." He hesitated, not wanting to offend her. "On the streets," Manon finished, wiping her tears. "The family that adopted me, they weren't good. Running away seemed like the only option, but now all I want is to find my brothers." Pierre felt a surge of determination welling up inside him. "Manon," he said, his voice firm, "I promise you that we will do everything we can to find Francois and Henri. I won't rest until you are reunited." The smile that lit Manon's face was like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Thank you, Mr. Pierre. I knew Santa could make miracles." Pierre felt the weight of that trust, but he was determined not to disappoint her. "Let's start immediately," he said, heading over to his desk. In the days that followed, Pierre threw himself headlong into the investigation. His first step was to contact St. Clair's orphanage, but he found only closed doors and evasive answers. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dubois," the director's cold voice echoed over the phone, "but we can't disclose information about past adoptions. It's a matter of privacy." Pierre felt his frustration grow, but he didn't give up. He scoured public records, contacted social workers, and even considered hiring a private detective. Every night, he met with Manon, sharing the little progress he'd made and marveling at the girl's resilience. "You know, Mr. Pierre," Manon said one evening as they shared hot chocolate, "sometimes I dream about the day we'll all be together again. Francois always wanted to be a doctor, and Henri loved to draw. Do you think they still remember me?" The question hit Pierre like a punch to the stomach. "I'm sure they do, Manon. Bonds like yours don't break easily." But as days turned into weeks, Pierre began to feel the weight of the challenge ahead. The leads were scarce, the bureaucracy endless, and each passing day he saw the light of hope in Manon's eyes flicker slightly. One particularly frustrating night, after yet another series of fruitless phone calls, Pierre found himself sitting in his study with his head in his hands. The magnitude of the task felt overwhelming. Then his eyes fell on an old photograph on his desk. In it, a young Pierre smiled alongside his students on a school outing. The memory of that day, the joy of making a difference in those children's lives, reawakened something inside him. With renewed determination, Pierre stood up. He wasn't just looking for two lost boys. He was fighting to reunite a family, to right a wrong that never should have happened. The next morning, Pierre awoke with an idea. If official channels were closed, perhaps it was time to try a different approach. He began planning a social media campaign, hoping the story of the separated triplets would touch hearts and generate leads. When he shared his plan with Manon, her eyes shone with renewed hope. "Do you think it could work, Mr. Pierre?" "I don't know, Manon," he answered honestly, "but we'll try. Sometimes, when doors close, we have to create our own windows." As they worked together on the campaign, Pierre couldn't help noticing how Manon seemed more animated, more alive. She shared more stories about her brothers, laughing as she recalled the mischief they got into at the orphanage. "Francois was always the bravest," she recounted, her eyes sparkling at the memory. "Once he convinced Henri and me to hide in the kitchen after curfew. We almost got caught, but it was worth it for the cookies we managed to snag." Pierre smiled, imagining the three little rascals in action. Each story, each shared memory, only strengthened his determination. As days passed, the campaign began to gain traction. People from all over England shared the story, offering support and information. Pierre spent hours responding to messages, checking leads, always with Manon by his side, her eyes gleaming with renewed hope at every new development. One night, as they organized the latest information received, Manon looked at Pierre with a seriousness beyond her years. "Mr. Pierre," she said softly, "even if we don't find Francois and Henri, thank you. Thank you for believing in me, for trying." Pierre felt his eyes fill with tears. He knelt beside Manon, holding her small hands in his. "Manon, I promise you, we won't give up. Whatever the outcome, we're in this together. And remember, sometimes Christmas miracles take a little longer, but that doesn't mean they're not on their way." In that moment, looking into Manon's hopeful eyes, Pierre knew that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, he would do everything in his power to reunite that family. The journey would be long and difficult, but the promise of a happy ending, of seeing three separated hearts finally reunited, was all the motivation he needed. With a determined smile, Pierre stood up. There was much work to be done, many stones to turn. But with Manon by his side and the magic of Christmas in his heart, he knew nothing was impossible. Pierre's car wound through London's narrow streets, leaving the bustle of the city behind. Next to him, Manon looked out the window, her eyes lost in memories that felt both so close and so distant. "Tell me more about the orphanage, Manon," Pierre asked softly, breaking the silence. Manon closed her eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. "It was an old place, with stone walls and a large garden out back. Francois, Henri, and I spent hours there, imagining we were explorers in a magical forest." Pierre could almost see the scene, three identical children laughing and running among the trees, their troubles momentarily forgotten. "Henri was the artist among us," Manon continued, her voice choked with emotion. "He drew on the walls with chalk, creating entire worlds. Francois always said that one day Henri would be famous, and we'd be his bodyguards." A laugh escaped Manon's lips, mixed with a contained sob. Pierre reached out, gently squeezing the girl's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "And Francois?" he asked. "Francois was the protector," Manon replied, her eyes shining at the memory. "When other children picked on us, he always stood in front. Once, he faced a much bigger boy to defend Henri. He got a black eye for a week, but he said it was worth it." As they approached St. Clair's orphanage, Manon's memories became more vivid, as if each passing mile brought her closer to the past. I remember our last night together, she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. We knew Francois would be taken the next morning. We stayed up all night, making impossible promises. Francois swore he would run away and find us. Henri promised he would learn to fly to rescue us, and I promised I would never forget them. A solitary tear slid down Manon's face. Pierre felt his heart clench, imagining the weight that child had carried. Finally, the car stopped in front of an imposing stone building. St. Clair's orphanage stood before them, its windows like vigilant eyes watching their arrival. "Are you ready?" Pierre asked gently. Manon nodded, taking a deep breath. "I am." Upon entering the orphanage, they were greeted by an air of distrust. The director, a middle-aged woman with a severe look, observed them suspiciously. "As I told you on the phone, Mr. Dubois, we can't disclose information about past adoptions," she stated firmly. Pierre was about to argue when a weak voice interrupted. "Manon, is that you, my dear?" Everyone turned to see an elderly lady standing at the hallway entrance. Her eyes, clouded by age, shone with recognition. "Marguerite!" Manon exclaimed, running to embrace the old lady. Marguerite, a former employee of the orphanage, held Manon tightly, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Oh, my darling, you've come back." The director looked uncomfortable with the scene. "Marguerite, you shouldn't be here. Your health." But Marguerite ignored her, focused only on Manon. "You've grown so much, but your eyes, they're still the same eyes as your brother's." Pierre took the opportunity. "Madame Marguerite, could we speak in private? We're looking for Francois and Henri." Marguerite's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and hope crossing her face. "Come with me," she whispered, guiding them to a small room at the back of the orphanage. Once alone, Marguerite sat down heavily on a chair, her eyes never leaving Manon. "I knew this day would come," she murmured. "I knew you would return looking for them." "Do you know where they are?" Manon asked anxiously. Marguerite shook her head sadly. "Not exactly, my dear. But I know more than I should." She got up with difficulty, heading to an old cupboard in the corner of the room. With trembling hands, she took out a dusty box. "I kept this all these years," she said, opening the box. "I knew one day it would be needed." Inside the box were letters, drawings, and small objects. Manon picked up a drawing, immediately recognizing Henri's style. It showed 3 figures holding hands, their faces beaming with huge smiles. "Henri left this behind on the day he was taken," Marguerite explained. "And this," she continued, picking up a small brooch, "belonged to Francois. He hid it in my hand before he left, asking me to keep it until you were reunited." Pierre watched, feeling they were on the verge of a great revelation. "Marguerite, what really happened? Why were they separated?" The old lady sighed deeply, the weight of secrets visible on her stooped shoulders. "It was a terrible mistake," she began. "The adoptions, they weren't exactly legal. There was money involved, influences. I tried to stop it, but..." Her words were cut off by a fit of coughing. Manon ran to fetch a glass of water, while Pierre helped Marguerite sit down again. "Francois," Marguerite continued after recovering, "was adopted by an influential family in Brighton. They wanted an heir, not siblings. Henri, oh, poor Henri. He was taken somewhere to the west, near Bristol, if I'm not mistaken. A family of artists." Manon absorbed every word, her hands tightly gripping Henri's drawing. "And why did they leave me behind?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marguerite's eyes filled with tears. "Because I begged, my dear. I begged that at least one of you stay. I thought I could protect you, but I failed. I failed all of you." Pierre felt a mix of emotions, anger at the injustice, compassion for Marguerite, and renewed determination to right the past wrongs. "It's not too late," he said firmly. "This information is a start. We can find them." Marguerite nodded slowly, taking Manon's hand. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "On the day Francois was taken, he made me promise something. He said, 'When Manon comes looking for us, tell her to find us where the sun kisses the sea.' I never understood what it meant, but maybe..." Manon's eyes lit up with recognition. "The beach!" she exclaimed. "So we made a pact. We promised to meet at the beach where we spent our last day together if we were ever separated." Pierre felt a wave of hope. It was a tenuous clue, but it was something. "Then that's where we'll go," he declared. As they left the orphanage, Manon carried Marguerite's box, a treasure of memories and clues. Pierre looked at the girl, seeing in her eyes a mix of determination and hope. The journey to find Francois and Henri was just beginning, but now they had a direction, and with each step, they came closer to healing the broken hearts of the triplets. Pierre's study had been transformed into an improvised command center. Maps of Brighton covered the walls, colorful sticky notes marked possible locations, and an enlarged photo of Francois, taken from the triplets' portrait, occupied the center of the bulletin board. Manon sat on the floor, surrounded by piles of papers, her eyes scanning phone directories and school records. Pierre, on the other hand, was on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "Yes, I understand confidentiality," he said, running a hand through his graying hair in frustration. "But we're talking about a separated family. Surely something can be done." Hanging up with a sigh, Pierre turned to Manon. "Another dead end, but we won't give up." Manon nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "We'll find him, Mr. Pierre. I know we will." Her words reignited Pierre's resolve. They had spent the last few weeks following every lead, no matter how small. Marguerite's information about the influential family in Brighton was their starting point, but the city was large, and there were many prominent families. "Maybe we should try a different approach," Pierre murmured, more to himself than to Manon. His eyes landed on a local Brighton newspaper he had acquired. An idea began to form in his mind. "Manon," he called, excitement growing in his voice. "What if, instead of looking directly for Francois, we look for someone who looks exactly like you?" Manon's eyes widened with understanding. "A talent show," she exclaimed. "Francois always loved to sing." Pierre smiled, the plan solidifying. "Exactly. We'll organize a talent show in Brighton. If Francois is there, he won't resist the chance to participate." In the following weeks, Pierre and Manon worked tirelessly. Contacts were made, permissions obtained, and soon posters announcing the Great Brighton Talent Show were spread all over the city. Anticipation grew each day. Pierre found himself waking in the middle of the night, heart racing at the thought of finally finding Francois. He watched Manon, noticing how she seemed to blossom with renewed hope, her smile more frequent, her eyes shining with expectation. On the eve of the talent show, Pierre and Manon arrived in Brighton. The nervousness between them was palpable. "What if he doesn't come?" Manon asked softly as they settled into the small hotel. Pierre knelt beside her, holding her small hands in his. "Then we'll keep looking. We won't give up, Manon. I promise." The morning of the show arrived, bringing with it a mix of anxiety and hope. The local auditorium was filled with young talents and their families. Pierre and Manon watched every face that passed, their hearts leaping at every boy who remotely resembled Francois. Hours passed, and disappointment began to set in. Performer after performer took the stage, but there was no sign of Francois. It was when the last contestant was announced that something extraordinary happened. A 10-year-old boy stepped on stage, confident posture, eyes shining with the same intensity as Manon's. Pierre felt his heart stop. Beside him, Manon gripped his arm tightly. "It's him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's Francois." The boy on stage began to sing, his clear, strong voice filling the auditorium. It was a lullaby, the same one Manon had mentioned they used to sing together at the orphanage. Pierre watched, moved, as Manon silently mouthed the lyrics, her lips moving in perfect sync with Francois's. When the song ended, the auditorium erupted in applause. Francois smiled, making a small bow before leaving the stage. "Let's go," Pierre said, rising to his feet. "We need to talk to him before he leaves." They hurried backstage, hearts pounding. But when they arrived, they found only families congratulating their children. Francois was nowhere to be seen. "There!" Manon shouted suddenly, pointing to a figure leaving through a side door. They ran, Pierre feeling the weight of every second. When they finally reached outside, they saw Francois getting into a luxurious car. "Francois!" Manon shouted, her voice filled with emotion. The boy turned, eyes widening as he saw Manon. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Recognition, shock, and then pure joy crossed Francois's face. "Manon," he whispered, taking a step toward her. But before they could get any closer, an elegant woman appeared, placing a protective hand on Francois's shoulder. "Come on, dear, it's time to go." "But Mom," Francois protested, his eyes never leaving Manon. "That's my sister." The woman looked from Francois to Manon, her expression a mixture of shock and fear. Without a word, she guided Francois into the car, shutting the door firmly. Pierre ran toward the vehicle, but it was too late. The car sped away, leaving them behind in a cloud of dust. "No!" Manon cried, falling to her knees. "We can't lose him again!" Pierre hugged her, his own heart heavy. "We haven't lost him, Manon," he said firmly. "Now we know he's here. And he knows you found him. This changes everything." As he comforted Manon, Pierre was already planning his next move. They had found Francois, but the real challenge was just beginning. How to approach the adoptive family, how to ensure the siblings could reunite without involving the authorities. One thing was certain, they would not give up. The brief moment of recognition between Manon and Francois had reignited hope. Now more than ever, Pierre was determined to reunite the triplets, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Tête d'Or Park in Brighton was bathed in the gentle light of late afternoon. Pierre nervously watched the playground, his eyes jumping from one face to another. Beside him, Manon stood still, her small hands gripping the hem of her shirt tightly. After the tumultuous encounter at the talent show, Pierre had worked tirelessly to establish contact with Francois's adoptive family. Days of careful negotiations and delicate explanations had finally led to this moment. A supervised meeting between the separated siblings. "There," Manon whispered suddenly, her voice trembling with emotion. Pierre followed her gaze and saw Francois walking toward them, accompanied by his adoptive mother. The boy looked nervous, his eyes anxiously scanning the crowd until they finally landed on Manon. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The two siblings stared at each other, separated by only a few meters, yet bound by a bond that 2 years of separation could not break. Then, as if an invisible barrier had been shattered, Francois ran. Manon lunged forward, and they collided in an embrace so strong it almost knocked them down. "Manon?" Francois sobbed, burying his face in her shoulder. "That's really you." Manon couldn't speak, tears streaming freely down her face as she held Francois as if afraid he might vanish at any moment. Pierre felt tears forming in his own eyes. He noticed Francois's adoptive mother was also moved, tears shining as she watched the reunion. Finally, the twins parted just enough to look into each other's eyes, still holding hands. "You look so different," Francois said, studying Manon's face. "But your eyes, they're exactly as I remembered." Manon smiled through her tears. "You've changed too. You're taller." Francois laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Mom says I'm growing like a weed, but look at you. Your hair is so long now." They sat down on a nearby bench, still holding hands, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing each other again. "Tell me everything," Manon pleaded. "What's your life been like? Are you happy?" Francois nodded enthusiastically. "My adoptive parents are very good to me. Dad taught me how to play soccer, and Mom takes me to music lessons. But," his voice faltered, "I always felt something was missing. Someone." Manon squeezed his hand. "I know. I felt the same way. Like a part of me was missing. I dreamed about you every night," Francois confessed. "You and Henri. Sometimes I woke up crying, and my adoptive mother didn't understand why." Manon rested her head on her brother's shoulder. "I dreamed of you too. Remember that lullaby Miss Marguerite used to sing to us?" Francois smiled. "How could I forget? It was the only thing that calmed Henri when he had nightmares." "I sang it every night," Manon said softly. "I imagined that somehow you could hear me." Francois closed his eyes, a peaceful expression on his face. "Maybe we could, because I always felt a strange comfort before sleeping, like someone was hugging me." Pierre watched their interaction with a heart full of emotion. It was as if the 2 years of separation had never existed. The connection between the twins was palpable. A bond time and distance had not severed. "And Henri?" Francois asked suddenly, opening his eyes. "Where did you find him?" Manon shook her head sadly. "Not yet, but now that we've found you, I'm sure we'll find him too." Francois nodded resolutely. "We'll find him together. Remember the promise we made, that if we were ever separated, we'd meet again on the beach where we spent our last day together." Manon's eyes lit up with recognition. Whitby Beach. How could I forget? Pierre, who had stayed discreetly aside to give the siblings privacy, approached at that moment. "Whitby? Is that a concrete clue to finding Henri?" Francois looked at Pierre curiously, and Manon quickly introduced him. "This is Mr. Pierre. He's been helping me search for you." Francois extended his hand politely. "Thank you for taking care of my sister, sir." Pierre smiled, moved by the boy's maturity. "It's an honor, Francois. Now, tell me about this beach." The twins eagerly explained their last day together before the separation, a surprise outing organized by the orphanage to celebrate their birthday. "We made a pact that day," Francois explained. "That we promised that if we were ever separated, we'd meet again on that beach. It was our special place." Pierre felt a wave of hope. It was a tenuous clue, but something concrete to follow. "Then we'll go there," he declared. "We'll find Henri." Francois's adoptive mother, who had kept a respectful distance, approached now. "It's getting late," she said gently. "We need to go, Francois." Panic crossed the twins' faces. "We can't separate again," Manon whispered, holding her brother's hand. Francois looked pleadingly at his adoptive mother. "Please, Mom, I can't lose her again." The woman hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed. Maybe we can arrange more meetings. And if Henri is found," she looked at Pierre, "we could discuss more permanent arrangements." The relief on Manon and Francois's faces was palpable. They embraced again, tears of joy mixed with the pain of their imminent parting. "I'll find you again," Francois promised, "and we'll find Henri together." Manon nodded, wiping her tears. Together. As she watched Francois walk away with his adoptive mother, Manon held Pierre's hand. "Shall we go to Whitby, Mr. Pierre?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Pierre smiled, feeling renewed determination. "Yes, Manon. We'll find Henri and complete your family." The sun set on Brighton's horizon, painting the sky in gold and pink. For Pierre, Manon, and Francois, it was the dawn of a new hope, the first step toward the complete reunion of the separated triplets. The sea breeze in Whitby whipped Manon's hair as she looked intently at the horizon, her eyes scanning the beach for a familiar face. Pierre stood beside her, watching every passing child closely, hoping to see the triplets' features in some solitary boy. It had been 3 days since they arrived in that picturesque coastal town, 3 days of fruitless searches, of hopes rising and quickly dashed. "What if he doesn't come, Mr. Pierre?" Manon asked, her voice trembling with worry. Pierre placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't lose hope, Manon. Remember, Francois is helping us from a distance. We have more eyes and ears now." As if in response, Pierre's phone rang. It was Francois, calling from Brighton. "Any news?" The boy's anxious voice sounded through the speaker. "Not yet," Pierre replied, trying to sound optimistic. "But we haven't given up. How are things there?" Francois sighed. "Nothing here either. Mom is helping me search online, but it's like looking for a needle in a haystack." The frustration was palpable in the boy's voice, and Pierre could feel the same in Manon. The siblings' growing anxiety was almost tangible, a weight that seemed to increase with each passing day without news of Henri. After hanging up, Pierre decided it was time for a new approach. "Let's visit local schools," he suggested. "If Henri is around, he's likely attending somewhere." The following days were a marathon of school visits, talks with principals and teachers, always careful not to reveal too much about the delicate situation of the triplets. It was during one of these visits that they got their first concrete lead. "Henri," an art teacher repeated, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Yes, we had a Henri here a few months ago, a very talented boy, especially at drawing." Manon's heart raced. "What did he look like?" she asked anxiously. The teacher smiled, quiet, introspective. But his eyes, they held a sadness that intrigued me, and his drawings always featured 3 identical children. Pierre and Manon exchanged emotional glances. It had to be him. "Where is he now?" Pierre asked, barely containing his excitement. The teacher's smile faded. "Unfortunately, he stopped attending about 2 months ago. The family said they were moving, but didn't leave any contact details." The revelation was a hard blow, so close, yet so far. Manon fought back tears as they left the school. "Don't give up," Pierre encouraged her. "This proves we're on the right track. Henri was here, and now we have a more recent description of him." That night, during a video call with Francois, they shared the news. "He still draws us," Francois exclaimed, a mix of joy and sadness in his voice. "He hasn't forgotten us." Manon nodded, tears in her eyes. "Sigh, but where did he go? Why did they move so suddenly?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Pierre could see the anxiety growing in the twins' eyes, the fear that they might have lost Henri forever. In the days that followed, they intensified the search. Pierre hired a private detective, while Manon and Francois, from afar, scoured social media and online forums for any mention of a boy who fit Henri's description. Manon's anxiety was palpable. She barely slept, spending hours looking at the sea, as if expecting Henri to magically emerge from the waves. Francois, in turn, channeled his frustration into action, bombarding Pierre with ideas and theories each call. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Manon had an epiphany. "Mr. Pierre," she exclaimed, running into his room at the small hotel they were staying in. "The drawings? Henri always drew the 3 of us together, right?" Pierre nodded, intrigued. "Yes, the teacher mentioned that. Why? What if—" Manon hesitated, almost afraid to believe her own theory. "What if he's leaving clues for us through his drawings?" It was a shot in the dark, but it was the best idea they had. The next morning, they returned to the school, asking to see some of the work Henri had left behind. The art teacher, happy to help, brought out a folder full of drawings. Manon examined them eagerly, her eyes searching for any detail that might be a hidden message. It was Francois, during a video call, who noticed something. "Wait!" he shouted. "That lighthouse in the background. Isn't it the one in Falmouth?" Pierre took the drawing, examining it closely. "Amade," he said slowly, a smile forming on his face. "It's the lighthouse in Falmouth, about 20 miles from here." The revelation was like a spark of hope. Quickly, they packed their bags and set off for Falmouth, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. As they approached the coastal town, Manon's anxiety peaked. "What if it's another dead end?" she whispered, her fear almost palpable. Pierre squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Then we keep looking. We won't give up, Manon. I promise." Upon entering Falmouth, they were greeted by the sight of the majestic lighthouse, just like in Henri's drawing. Manon held her breath, her eyes sweeping the streets, as if expecting to see her brother at any moment. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. Pierre parked the car near the harbor. "At the beginning," he said, his voice firm and determined. "We'll scour every street, every school, every park. Henri is here. Manon. I can feel it." As they walked through the town, Pierre noticed Manon seemed charged with nervous energy. Her eyes examined every face, her body tense like a violin string. The phone rang. It was Francois again. "Any news?" he asked anxiously. "We just arrived," Pierre replied. "But we're closer, Francois. Very close." After hanging up, Pierre looked at Manon, seeing her brother's anxiety reflected in her eyes. The triplets, though separated by miles, seemed united in their apprehension and hope. "We'll find him," Pierre said, both to Manon and to himself. "Henri is here somewhere, and we won't stop until we bring him back to you." With those words, they immersed themselves in Falmouth streets, each step bringing them closer to solving the triplets' puzzle. The mystery of Henri was about to unfold, and with it, the promise of a reunited family hovered in the air, as tangible as the ocean breeze surrounding them. The small cafe in London felt like a world apart from the turmoil of searching for Henri. Pierre watched Marguerite, the orphanage's former employee, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly as she held her teacup. Beside him, Manon could barely contain her anxiety, her eyes fixed on the elderly lady, waiting for revelations that could change everything. "I knew this day would come," Marguerite began, her voice trembling with age and burdens. "From the moment you were separated, I both feared and hoped for it." Pierre leaned forward, his voice gentle but urgent. "Please, Madame Marguerite, we need to know everything. What really happened back then?" Marguerite closed her eyes, as if reliving painful memories. "It was a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding that turned into a tragedy." She opened her eyes, looking directly at Manon. "You never should have been separated." Manon swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "But why were we?" "It all started with an inspection at St. Clair's orphanage," Marguerite explained. As the inspectors were concerned about the number of children and limited resources, they suggested that separating the triplets might be beneficial, arguing each would receive more individual attention in different families. Pierre frowned. "But surely someone protested against this?" Marguerite nodded sadly. "I did. The orphanage's director did too. But then—" She hesitated, looking around nervously before lowering her voice. "Then money came into play." Manon gasped, her eyes widening with the revelation. Pierre felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "What money?" he asked, dreading the answer. "Donations," Marguerite replied, the word bitter on her tongue. "Large donations promised by influential families on the condition they could adopt one of the triplets. They didn't want all three, just one perfect heir." Anger flared in Manon's eyes. "So we were sold." Marguerite reached out, holding Manon's hand. "No, my dear, it wasn't that simple. That. The director thought she was doing the best for the orphanage, for all the other children. She believed the money could improve conditions for everyone." Pierre shook his head, incredulous. "But separating siblings, especially triplets, how could that be considered acceptable?" "It wasn't," Marguerite answered, tears shining in her eyes. "That was a terrible mistake, one that haunts me every day. I tried to stop it, begged that at least two of you stay together. But in the end—" Her voice failed. Manon, despite her own pain, squeezed Marguerite's hand. "What happened in the end?" Marguerite took a deep breath before continuing. "In the end, the decision was made above our heads. One night, François was taken. 2 weeks later, Henri and you, Manon, were left behind because—" She hesitated again. "Because," Manon insisted, her voice trembling. "Because I begged," Marguerite confessed, tears now running freely down her face. "I begged that at least one of you remain. I thought I could protect you, maybe even find a way to reunite you all again." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with conflicting emotions. Pierre could see Manon's internal struggle, anger at the separation, gratitude to Marguerite for trying, sadness for losing her brothers. "There's more," Marguerite continued after a moment. "Something I discovered only recently, something that might explain why Henri disappeared from Whitby." Pierre and Manon leaned in, attentive. "The family that adopted Henri," Marguerite said, lowering her voice further, "wasn't who they claimed to be. I found out they were part of an illegal adoption network. When they heard someone was looking for the triplets, they probably panicked and ran. The revelation hit like a bomb." Manon covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with horror. Pierre felt anger and determination flare inside him. "That explains why it's been so hard to track him," Pierre murmured, his mind racing with the implications. "They're probably using false names, moving constantly." Marguerite nodded sadly. "I'm so sorry. If I had discovered this earlier—" Manon, overcoming her initial shock, spoke with surprising strength. "It's not your fault, Madame Marguerite. You did what you could to protect us. Now we must use this information to find Henri." Pierre agreed, admiring the girl's resilience. "Manon's right. This changes our approach, but it won't stop us. We'll find Henri and bring him back safely." Marguerite looked at both of them, gratitude and hope shining in her tired eyes. "There's one more thing," she said, rummaging in her bag. She took out a small locket. "This belonged to your mother. She left it with me before she passed. Inside is a photo of her with you three as newborns." With trembling hands, Manon took the locket, opening it carefully. Silent tears slid down her cheeks at the image of a young woman smiling, holding 3 identical babies. "Mom," she whispered, gently touching the photo. Pierre felt his own heart clench at the scene. The truth was emerging layer by layer, each revelation bringing both pain and hope. "We'll use this," he said firmly, placing a hand on Manon's shoulder. "Every piece of information brings us closer to Henri, closer to reuniting your family." Manon nodded, drying her tears and lifting her chin with renewed determination. "Yes, we'll find him. And when we do, nothing will separate us again." As they left the cafe, the weight of revealed secrets hung over them. But with that weight came clarity of purpose. The truth, no matter how painful, guided their quest. And with every step they took, they came closer to solving the final mystery: Henri's whereabouts. The tension was palpable, the anxiety mounting. Yet amid it all, a flame of hope burned brighter than ever. The secrets of the past were finally coming to light, and with them, the promise of a future in which the triplets would be together again. Pierre's heart pounded as he guided the car through Falmouth's narrow streets. Next to him, Manon remained silent, her eyes scanning every face passing by the window. In the back seat, Francois could barely contain his excitement, having arrived from Brighton the previous night. The clue that led them here seemed almost miraculous. One of Henri's drawings, found in a local gallery, depicted 3 children holding hands in front of a lighthouse, the Falmouth Lighthouse. It was as if Henri were leaving breadcrumbs, hoping to be found. "There!" Francois shouted suddenly, pointing to a seafront park. Pierre braked abruptly, following Francois's direction. There, sitting alone on a swing, was a boy. Even from a distance, it was unmistakable. He looked just like Manon and Francois. "Henri," Manon whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Before Pierre could say anything, the 2 siblings were out of the car, running toward the park. He followed, his heart in his throat, watching the scene unfold as if in slow motion. Henri raised his eyes at the sound of approaching footsteps. For a moment, he remained frozen, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Then, as if awakening from a dream, he stood up from the swing. "Manon? Francois?" His voice was just a trembling whisper. "Henri!" the 2 shouted in unison, rushing toward their brother. The 3 collided in an embrace so strong it nearly toppled them over. Tears flowed freely, mingling as they clung to one another as if their lives depended on it. Pierre stopped a short distance away, not wanting to intrude on this sacred moment. He felt his own tears escaping down his cheeks as he witnessed the reunion he had helped bring about. "I knew it," Henri sobbed, his voice muffled against his sibling's shoulders. "I knew you'd find me." Manon pulled back slightly, holding Henri's face between her hands. "We never stopped looking. Never." Francois, one arm still wrapped firmly around Henri, used his other hand to wipe away his tears. "We're together now, and nothing will separate us again." Slowly, they sank to the ground, still hugging, as if their legs could no longer support the weight of their emotions. Pierre watched in awe as they seemed to fit perfectly, 3 pieces of a puzzle finally reunited. "Tell us everything," Manon begged, holding Henri's hands. "What happened? Where have you been?" Henri took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "It was hard," he began, his voice trembling. "The family that adopted me, they weren't good. Always moving, always hiding something. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what." Francois squeezed his brother's shoulder in silent support, encouraging him to continue. "I never stopped thinking about you," Henri went on, looking from Manon to Francois. "I drew us together every day, hoping that somehow it would keep us connected." "We saw your drawings," Manon exclaimed. "That's how we found you. You led us here." A small smile appeared on Henri's face. "I hoped so. When I heard rumors someone was searching for separated triplets, I started leaving clues in my drawings. I hoped it was you." "And here we are," Francois said, his voice filled with emotion, "together again." The 3 embraced once more, as if afraid that releasing each other would reveal it was all just a dream. Pierre, feeling it was the right moment, approached slowly. Henri noticed him for the first time. curiosity and caution mixing in his expression. "Henri," Manon said softly, "this is Mr. Pierre. He helped us find you." Henri looked at Pierre, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. But that single word carried a world of emotion. Pierre knelt down beside the triplets, feeling humbled by the strength of their bond. "I'm so happy for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but we need to talk about what happens next." The three siblings exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. "We won't be separated again," Francois declared firmly. "Never," Manon and Henri agreed in unison. Pierre nodded, understanding the depth of their promise. "We'll do everything we can to keep you together," he assured them. "But it will be complicated. There's a lot to sort out." "No matter how hard it is," Manon said, her voice full of determination, "we'll face it together." Henri, who had seemed the quietest of the three, spoke with surprising strength. "We spent 2 years apart, surviving on our own. Now that we're together, nothing can stop us." Pierre felt a wave of pride and admiration for these three children who had faced so much and still held such strength and love. "So," he said, a smile spreading across his face, "how about we start with a good meal? I bet you have a lot to talk about." The triplets laughed, their laughter echoing through the park. As they stood up, they never let go of each other's hands, as if physical contact was needed to believe this was real. Pierre guided them back to the car, his heart overflowing with emotion. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw the three in the back seat, Manon in the middle, Henri and Francois on either side, their heads leaning together as they spoke quietly, occasionally laughing or wiping away a tear. In that moment, Pierre knew that no matter the challenges to come, these three united hearts would overcome any obstacle. The journey to keep them together had only just begun, but the hardest part, finding them and reuniting them, had been achieved. As he drove toward an uncertain future, Pierre made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to protect this newly reunited family, to ensure the smiles on their faces would never again be extinguished by separation. Three hearts, finally together. And with that union, a new story was about to begin. The lawyer's office in London was tense, the air heavy with restrained emotions. Pierre watched nervously as Francois and Manon's adoptive families entered, their faces a mixture of apprehension and confusion. The triplets, sitting together on a sofa, held one another's hands tightly, as if afraid of being separated again. The situation with Henri's adoptive family was more complicated, given the illegal nature of his adoption. They were not present, having disappeared as soon as they learned of the triplets' reunion. "What's going on here?" Francois' adoptive mother, Mrs. Dubois, spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. "Francois, who are these children?" Before Francois could answer, Manon's adoptive father, Mr. Lefebvre, let out an exclamation of surprise. "My God, they're identical." Pierre stepped forward, taking on the role of mediator. "Please, have a seat. We have much to discuss." As Pierre explained the situation, the triplets' separation, the search, the reunion, the adoptive family's expressions shifted from confusion to shock, then to a complex mix of emotions. "This is absurd," Mrs. Dubois exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "Francois is our son. We raised him. We love him." "No one is denying that, Mom," Pierre said softly, "but the situation is more complicated than it seems." Francois stood up, his voice trembling but determined. "Mom, Dad, I love you. You're my parents in every way that matters. But Manon and Henri, they're part of me. I can't just ignore them now that I've found them." Manon and Henri stood as well, flanking their brother in a silent show of unity. Mr. Lefebvre, who had remained silent until then, spoke with a rough voice. "Manon, you knew about this. Is that why you always seemed incomplete?" Manon nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I felt something was missing. Now I know what—" The silence that followed was deafening. The adoptive families looked at the children they had raised as if seeing them for the first time. "What happens now?" Mrs. Dubois asked, her voice barely a whisper. Pierre took a deep breath. "That's what we need to discuss. The situation is unprecedented and Unprecedented, Mr. Lefebvre interrupted, his voice rising. This is madness. Manon is our daughter. We have legal documents, a lifetime of memories, and we have a bond of blood. Henri spoke up for the first time, his voice shaking with emotion. Don't you understand? We were separated against our will. We spent 2 years feeling like a part of us was missing. Tears flowed freely now from everyone present. Pierre felt his own heart break at the conflict in the children's eyes, the love for their adoptive families at war with the desire to remain together. Can't we just share them? Mrs. Dubois suggested hesitantly. Regular visits, holidays together. It's not enough, Francois said quietly. We need to be together, every day. Pierre intervened again, feeling the tension rise. Perhaps we can consider a shared custody arrangement. The children could live together, alternating between both families' homes. What about Henri? Mr. Lefebvre asked. His situation is complicated. Pierre nodded gravely. We're working on that. Henri's illegal adoption will be annulled, and he will need a new legal family. We'll adopt him, Mrs. Dubois said suddenly, surprising everyone. If that means we can keep Francois. The silence that followed was laden with emotion. The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. It's not that simple, Pierre said gently. Legally, morally, there's a lot to consider. The following hours were an emotional roller coaster. Heated arguments gave way to quiet sobs, desperate promises to cautious negotiations. Pierre watched, his heart heavy, as families struggled to adapt to a new reality no one had foreseen. What if, Manon began hesitantly, looking to her brothers for support. What if we all moved to the same city? We could live close to each other, go to the same school. The suggestion hung in the air, a possibility no one had considered before. That could work, Mr. Lefebvre said slowly, exchanging glances with his wife. Mrs. Dubois nodded, wiping away tears. We could try. For the children's happiness. Pierre felt a wave of relief sweep through the room. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. There's still a lot to resolve, he warned. To legal issues, logistics. We'll solve them, Francois said firmly, holding his siblings' hands. Together. As the families began discussing practical details of the arrangement, Pierre stepped back, observing the scene with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with emotional and legal obstacles. But looking at the triplets' determined faces, he knew it would be worth it. Tears still flowed, but now they were a mixture of sadness, relief, and hope. The conflict was not fully resolved, but a compromise had been reached. A new chapter was about to begin, a story of two families becoming one, united by their love for 3 extraordinary children. Pierre discreetly wiped away a tear of his own. He had begun this journey as a stranger, driven by an unusual Christmas request from a lonely girl. Now, he found himself deeply involved in these families' lives, witness to a miracle he had helped bring forth. As the sun set over London, casting a golden glow through the office windows, Pierre made a silent promise. He would be there for these children, for these families, helping them navigate the turbulent waters that still lay ahead. Because in the end, he knew love, whether by blood or by choice, would always find a way. The autumn sunlight filtered through the windows of the conference room, casting long shadows over the tense faces present. Pierre watched the assembled group, the adoptive families, the triplets, social workers, and lawyers. The air was thick with emotion, expectation, and fear. We are here to discuss the future of Manon, Francois, and Henri. The family court judge began, his deep voice echoing in the room. This is an unprecedented case, and we must carefully consider the children's best interests. Pierre felt a knot in his throat. He looked at the triplets, sitting together, their hands entwined in a silent gesture of unity. Their identical faces reflected a mixture of hope and apprehension. The social worker was the first to speak. From an emotional well-being perspective, separating the triplets again would be extremely harmful. They have developed a deep bond since their reunion. Mrs. Dubois, Francois' adoptive mother, stood up, tears shining in her eyes. We love Francois as our own son. He is part of our family. How can we just give that up? No one is asking you to give up anything, ma'am. Pierre intervened softly. We are looking for a solution that benefits everyone. Mr. Lefebvre, Manon's adoptive father, shook his head. But how is that possible? We can't split the children in half. The tension in the room was palpable. The triplets shrank visibly, the fear of another separation reflected in their eyes. It was Henri who broke the silence, his voice trembling but determined. Please, don't separate us again. We spent 2 years feeling like a piece of us was missing. Now that we're together, it's like we can finally breathe. Manon nodded, tears flowing down her face. We love our adoptive families, but Francois and Henri are part of me. I can't imagine losing them again. Francois added, his voice thick with emotion. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to stay together. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with emotion. Pierre felt his heart break at the conflict playing out on every face. The adoptive family's lawyer cleared his throat. Legally, Francois and Manon's adoptions are valid. We must consider the bonds formed over the past 2 years. But what about the bonds of blood? Countered the lawyer representing the triplets' interests. These children should never have been separated in the first place. The discussion intensified, voices overlapping as each side presented their arguments. Pierre watched, feeling powerless amid the whirlwind of emotions and legalities. Then an idea took shape in his mind. He rose, asking for silence with a gesture. What if, he began hesitantly, we could create a situation where no one has to give up anything? All eyes turned toward him, curious and skeptical. Explain, Mr. Dubois, the judge encouraged. Pierre took a deep breath. What if both adoptive families and the triplets moved to the same town? The children could live together, alternating between the two families. They would attend the same school, have the same activities. It would be like one big extended family. The silence that followed was broken by Mrs. Dubois. Is that possible? It would be complicated, admitted the family's lawyer, but legally feasible if all parties agree. The triplets exchanged hopeful glances. We would make it work, Francois said firmly. We'd do anything to stay together. Manon and Henri nodded emphatically. The judge considered for a moment. It's an interesting proposal, but there's much to consider. Jobs, schools, logistics. We can solve that, Mr. Lefebvre said slowly, exchanging looks with his wife. If it's for Manon's sake and for all of them. The social worker nodded approvingly. From the children's welfare perspective, this arrangement could offer the best of both worlds, family stability and connection with their biological siblings. The discussion continued for hours, details debated, concerns raised and addressed. Pierre watched, his heart racing with the possibility of a real solution. As the debate unfolded, he noticed the triplets whispering among themselves, determination shining in their eyes. Finally, Francois stood up, speaking for all three. We know this is hard for everyone, but we want you to know that, no matter what happens, we love all our families, the ones who raised us and the one we just rediscovered. We promise to do our best to make this work, if you give us the chance. The boy's words seemed to strike something deep in everyone present. Pierre saw tears in the adoptive family's eyes, a mixture of pride and resignation. The judge looked at each face in the room, assessing, this is an unprecedented case, requiring a unique solution. Mr. Dubois's proposal, though unconventional, seems to offer the best compromise for all parties involved. He paused, his gaze settling on the triplets. You three have been through more than any child should. Your courage and love for each other are admirable. If everyone agrees, I am inclined to approve this arrangement, with regular reviews to ensure it's working for everyone. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. The triplets embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces. The adoptive families, though still visibly emotional, exchanged looks of resigned acceptance. Pierre felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a beginning, a path to keep these three hearts together, without denying the love and bonds formed over the last 2 years. As the meeting ended and practical details began to take shape, Pierre approached the triplets. Are you all right? He asked softly. The three nodded, their faces lit by identical smiles. Thanks to you, Mr. Pierre, Manon said, hugging him impulsively. You reunited us and now you're keeping us together. Pierre felt tears in his own eyes as he returned the hug, Francois and Henri joining in. You did this, he said, his voice choked. All your love and determination made the impossible possible. As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow over the room, Pierre felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead would be challenging, but looking at the smiling faces of the triplets, he knew it would be worth every moment. 3 hearts once separated, now beat in unison, ready to face the future together. The living room of Marguerite's small home was steeped in tense silence. Pierre, the triplets, and Francoise and Manon's adoptive families sat waiting anxiously. Marguerite, the orphanage's former employee, looked fragile in her armchair, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly as she held an old shoebox. "Toy, there's something you need to know," Marguerite began, her voice trembling with the weight of the secret she had carried for so long. "Something I should have told you a long time ago, but fear and shame kept me silent." The triplets leaned forward, instinctively holding each other's hands. Pierre felt a knot form in his throat, anticipating the revelation to come. Marguerite took a deep breath, tears already forming in her tired eyes. "I am not just the former orphanage employee who cared for you. I am your grandmother." The silence that followed was deafening. The triplets' jaws dropped, their eyes wide with shock. The adoptive families exchanged looks of confusion and surprise. "Our grandmother," Manon finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Marguerite nodded, tears now flowing freely down her wrinkled cheeks. "Yes, my dear, your maternal grandmother." With trembling hands, she opened the shoebox, revealing several old photographs and yellowed documents. She picked up a photo and held it out to the triplets. "This was your mother, my daughter Elise," she said softly. In the photo, a young woman beamed with a radiant smile, her bright eyes identical to the triplets. "She was so young, so full of life," Marguerite continued, her voice choked with emotion. "Elise always wanted to be a mother. When she found out she was expecting triplets, she was overjoyed." Francois, who was holding the photo, gently traced their mother's face with his finger. "What happened to her?" he asked quietly. Marguerite closed her eyes, as if the memory was too painful to bear. There were complications during childbirth. Elise, she didn't survive. "She gave her life to bring you 3 into the world." A collective sob echoed in the room. The triplets embraced, crying for the mother they never knew. "And our father?" Henri asked through tears. Marguerite's expression hardened slightly. "He was a man named Antoine. When he learned of the pregnancy, he was frightened. He promised to stand by Elise, but after she passed, he disappeared. I could not find him." Pierre, who had remained silent, couldn't contain his question. "But Marguerite, why didn't you keep the children? Why let them go to the orphanage?" The pain in Marguerite's eyes was palpable. "Oh, how I wanted to, but I was too old, a widow with no resources. The authorities said I couldn't raise 3 babies alone. They took you," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I got a job at the orphanage to stay close to you. I watched you grow up, wanting desperately to tell you the truth, to hold you, to call you my grandchildren. But I feared it would only complicate your lives." Manon rose, walking slowly toward Marguerite. Gently, she removed the elderly lady's hands from her face. "You were there all along," Manon said softly, tears in her eyes. "All those times you comforted us, told us stories. It was more than kindness, wasn't it?" Marguerite nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Francois and Henri joined their sister, kneeling beside Marguerite's armchair. "Why didn't you tell us when we reunited?" Francois asked, his voice trembling. Marguerite dried her tears with a worn handkerchief. "I feared it was too late. You had new families, new lives. What right did I have to complicate everything?" Henri took Marguerite's hand, squeezing it gently. "You are our family too. You always have been." The adoptive families, who had been watching the scene in stunned silence, finally spoke. "This is extraordinary," Mrs. Dubois said, her voice choked with emotion. "All these years, and they had a grandmother." Mr. Lefebvre stood and walked over to Marguerite. Madame, you don't have to carry this burden alone anymore. Perhaps, there is room for all of us in these children's lives." Pierre felt his heart expand at the scene before him. What had begun as a quest to reunite siblings had grown into something much bigger, an entire family being pieced back together, with ramifications no one could have predicted. "Children," he said gently, "how do you feel about all this?" The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Manon spoke, her voice firm despite her tears. "We always felt something was missing. Even after we found each other, there was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Now we understand why. Our family wasn't complete without you, Grandma." Marguerite sobbed at the word grandma, pulling all three into a tight hug. "Forgive me," she begged between tears. "Forgive me for not being strong enough to fight for you, for hiding the truth for so long." "There's nothing to forgive," Francois said firmly. "You did what you could under the circumstances. What matters is that we're together now." Pierre watched, moved, as the adoptive families joined the hug, forming a circle around Marguerite and the triplets. It was a powerful scene, the past and present merging, love transcending blood and paper. As tears flowed freely, blending into a river of past pain and future hope, Pierre knew he was witnessing something truly miraculous. The truth, as painful as it was, had set them all free. The lies and secrets that had kept them apart for so long were finally brought to light, clearing the way for a new beginning. "So," he said softly, as the sobs began to subside, "what happens now?" Marguerite looked up, her eyes shining with determination. "Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to be part of my grandchildren's lives, not to replace anyone, but to add more love to the family you've already built." The adoptive families exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. "There's plenty of room in our hearts for everyone," Mrs. Dubois said softly. Pierre felt a wave of emotion wash over him. What had started with a little girl's plea on a cold Christmas night had transformed into an extraordinary journey of discovery, forgiveness, and unconditional love. As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow through Marguerite's windows, Pierre knew he was witnessing the start of a new chapter. A chapter full of challenges, no doubt, but also brimming with love, understanding, and the promise of a future where no one would ever feel incomplete again. The truth had made everyone cry, but these were tears of healing, release, and above all, hope for the future now unfolding before them. The afternoon sun filtered through Marguerite's living room windows, illuminating the emotional faces of everyone present. The silence following the revelation of Marguerite's true identity was heavy, filled with conflicting emotions and unspoken questions. Pierre watched closely each person's reaction. The triplets, Manon, Francois, and Henri, sat together on the sofa, their hands entwined, eyes lost in deep thought. The adoptive families of Manon and Francois seemed stunned, exchanging glances between Marguerite and the children they had raised as their own. It was Manon who finally broke the silence, her voice trembling but determined. "So, we have a grandmother, a blood relative." Francois nodded slowly, squeezing his sister's hand. "It's like a piece of the puzzle we didn't even know was missing just fell into place." Henri, always the quietest, looked at Marguerite with tear-filled eyes. "Why did you wait so long to tell us?" Marguerite wiped away a tear sliding down her cheek. "Fear, my dears. Fear of complicating your lives, of not being accepted, of not being enough." Mrs. Dubois and Francois's adoptive mother took a step forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "And now, what does this mean for our families?" Her question hung in the air, laden with anxiety and uncertainty. Pierre felt tension rise in the room, the conflict between established love and newly discovered biological ties palpable. "And you are our families," Manon said firmly, looking at her adoptive parents. "Nothing changes that." Yet even as she spoke these words, Pierre could see the struggle in her eyes, the conflict between loyalty to the family who raised her and the desire to know her biological heritage. Francois got up, walking over to Marguerite. He hesitated for a moment before hugging her gently. "Thank you for loving us in silence all these years," he whispered. Marguerite sobbed, returning the hug with all the strength her aged arms allowed. "Oh, my boy," I dreamed of this moment for so long. The moving scene seemed to break an invisible barrier. Soon, Manon and Henri joined the embrace, forming a knot of emotion, tears, and muffled laughter filling the space. Pierre observed the adoptive families, noting the mixture of emotions on their faces, joy for the children's happiness, but also an undeniable fear of losing something precious. Mr. Lefebvre, Manon's adoptive father, cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion. We always knew this day might come, that Manon might want to know her origins. His wife nodded, silent tears running down her cheeks. We just never expected it to be so complex. Pierre felt it was time to intervene, to offer some structure to the emotional storm unfolding before them. Perhaps, he suggested gently, we can discuss how everyone can be part of these children's lives. It's not about choosing between families, but about expanding the circle of love. The triplets pulled away from Marguerite, looking at Pierre with a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. How would that work? Henri asked, his voice small and uncertain. Pierre smiled encouragingly. Well, we were already planning an arrangement where the three of you could live together, alternating between your adoptive family's homes. Maybe we can include Marguerite in this plan. The suggestion sparked a new round of emotional discussions. The adoptive families voiced concerns about how it would affect the children's stability, while Marguerite insisted she didn't want to disrupt the lives already established. I only want to be part of your lives, she said, looking at the triplets with pleading eyes. I don't need to be grandma full-time. I just want Martha to know you, to share your mother's stories, to be a presence in your lives. Francois looked at his adoptive parents, his eyes begging for understanding. Mom, Dad, this doesn't mean I love you any less. You are my parents in every way that matters. But Marguerite, she's a connection to our history, to who we are. Mrs. Dubois wiped a tear and nodded slowly. We understand, dear. It's just an adjustment. Manon approached her adoptive parents, hugging them tightly. You saved me, she whispered. You gave me a home, love, everything I needed. That never changes. The moment was interrupted by a muffled sob from Henri. Everyone turned to him, surprised by the emotional outburst of the usually calm boy. What about me? He asked, his voice breaking. My adoption wasn't real. I don't have an adoptive family to go back to. Where do I fit in all this? The silence that followed was deafening. Pierre's heart broke for the obvious pain in Henri's voice. Marguerite moved first, kneeling with difficulty before her grandson. My dear, she said softly, holding his hands, you have a place, right here, with your siblings, with all these people who love you, and with me, always with me. The adoptive families exchanged looks, a silent understanding passing between them. Henri, Mr. Lefebvre said gently, perhaps you could stay with us. We would love to have you as part of our family. Mrs. Dubois nodded emphatically. Or with us, whichever you prefer. You're Francois's brother, which makes you part of our family too. Tears flowed freely now, not just from Henri, but everyone in the room. Pierre felt a wave of emotion wash over him, witnessing the love and compassion flowing freely, transcending blood and paper. See, he said softly, his own voice choked with emotion. There's enough love here for everyone. We can make this work if we're all willing to try. The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Manon spoke, her voice firm despite the tears. We want to try. We want all our families in our lives, our adoptive families, our grandmother, each other. We know it won't be easy, but it's worth trying. Francois and Henri nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting determination through the tears. Pierre looked around the room, seeing hesitant but determined nods from all the adults. It was a start, a first step toward an uncertain future, but one filled with possibilities. Then, he said, a smile forming on his face, let's start planning. How will we make this work for everyone? As the discussion unfolded, plans were made, adjustments considered. Pierre could not help but feel a wave of hope. The tears still flowed, but now they were a mix of joy, relief, and anticipation. The road ahead would be challenging, full of difficult moments and constant adjustments. But looking at the determined faces around him, the reunited triplets, the adoptive families willing to open their hearts wider, Marguerite finally able to embrace her role as grandmother, Pierre knew the love uniting them was stronger than any obstacle they might face. The tears of indecision had given way to tears of hope and possibility. And at that moment, in that room full of open hearts and willing souls, the future seemed to shine with the promise of a truly united family, built on foundations of love, understanding, and acceptance. The living room of Marguerite's house was decorated with twinkling lights and festive wreaths. It was Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that fateful meeting between Manon and Pierre, when he'd been dressed as Santa. The scent of hot chocolate and freshly baked cookies filled the air, blending with the aroma of cinnamon candles. Pierre observed the scene before him with a heart overflowing with emotion. The triplets, Manon, François, and Henri, sat together by the Christmas tree, laughing and sharing stories. Their adoptive families chatted animatedly with Marguerite, exchanging recipes and plans for the new year. The journey to this moment had not been easy. Months of negotiations, adjustments, and compromises had led to a solution that, though unconventional, worked surprisingly well for everyone involved. The families had agreed to move to the same town. They had purchased a large home with enough space to accommodate the triplets and allow the adoptive families and Marguerite to take turns spending time together. It was a fluid arrangement, based on love and mutual understanding. "Mr. Pierre," Manon called, waving for him to join them. "Come see the present we made for you." Pierre smiled, walking over to the children. They handed him a carefully wrapped package. With trembling hands, Pierre opened the present. It was a photo album, filled with images from the past year, captured moments of the journey they had shared. Tears formed in his eyes as he turned the pages. "It's so you'll never forget how it all started," François explained softly. "And how it ended, or rather how it continues." Henri, usually the most reserved, spoke with surprising conviction. "You reunited us, Mr. Pierre. You gave us our family back." Manon nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Not only did you bring our brothers back, but you gave us an even bigger family than we could have imagined." Pierre felt a lump in his throat, at a loss for words. Finally, he managed, "You've given me much more than I could have ever imagined. You reminded me of the true meaning of Christmas, of love and of family." At that moment, Marguerite approached, leaning on her cane. Her eyes sparkled with happy tears. "Pierre," she said softly, "there are not enough words to thank you for what you've done for our family." The adoptive families joined the group, forming a circle around the Christmas tree. Mrs. Dubois, with a warm smile, had said, "When all this began, we were so afraid of losing something. We never imagined that, in fact, we would gain so much more." Mr. Lefebvre nodded, putting an arm around his wife. "We learned that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Our family has grown in ways we never thought possible." Pierre looked around, amazed at the transformation. Where once there was fear and uncertainty, now there was acceptance and unconditional love. The tears that had once been of pain and confusion were now of pure joy. "I think it's time for our new tradition," Marguerite announced, taking an envelope from the side table. Everyone gathered closer as she opened the envelope, revealing a photograph. It was an image of Elise, the triplets' mother, taken on a Christmas long ago. "Each Christmas," Marguerite explained, her voice thick with emotion, "we will add this photo to our tree, to remember where we came from and celebrate where we're going." The triplets took turns hanging the photo on the tree, each touching their mother's image with reverence. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Pierre watched as the families embraced, the barriers between adoptive and biological completely dissolved. It was a scene he would never forget, the culmination of an incredible journey that began with a simple Christmas wish. As everyone gathered for a group photo, Pierre reflected on the year that had passed. He remembered the lonely girl he had met on that cold night, the mysterious box that contained both pain and hope. He thought of the challenges they had faced, the moments of doubt and fear, but above all, he thought of the power of love, a love that had transcended blood, legal documents, and social conventions, a love that had created a family where once there were only broken fragments. "Mr. Pierre," Manon called, pulling him from his thoughts. "Come on, you're part of this family too." With a full heart, Pierre joined the group. The camera's flash captured the moment. Broad smiles, eyes bright with happy tears, arms entwined in an embrace that spanned generations and diverse histories. Later, as the night went on and the celebration continued, Pierre found himself alone for a moment, gazing out the window at the gently falling snow. He thought about the miracle he had witnessed and helped to create. This, he realized, was the true spirit of Christmas. It wasn't the presents under the tree or the twinkling lights. It was the love that brought people together, that healed old wounds and created new possibilities. It was the ability to forgive, to accept, to open one's heart to new connections. Pierre smiled, a single tear of joy rolling down his cheek. He had started this journey as a lonely man dressed as Santa, doubting the magic of Christmas. Now he found himself at the center of a real Christmas miracle. A family restored, hearts healed, love multiplied. As he turned to rejoin the celebration, Pierre made a silent promise. He would continue to believe in the magic of Christmas, in the power of love to overcome all obstacles, and he would always remember the most important lesson he had learned. Family is not defined by blood or papers, but by the love we share and the choices we make each day to care for one another. With his heart light and full of gratitude, Pierre returned to the living room, ready to embrace the bright future awaiting this extraordinary family. The joyful tears shining in every pair of eyes were the most powerful testament to the miracle they had accomplished together, the miracle of love, family, and the true Christmas spirit.